everyone, we're back with our next recipe. It's going to be, tonight we're having turkey and kale soup. You can make this into a stew and I'll tell you how in a minute, but this is one of our family favorites and it's very nutritious, so we will get started here. So we're going to do this in the pressure cooker. Now you can do this, you do not have to use a pressure cooker for this at all. You can totally do this just in a pot on top of the stove. I'm just doing the pressure cooker because I am. There's actually no particular reason why I'm doing it that way. Just that's how I usually do it. Honestly, it's because normally one step in this recipe is to cook a sweet potato, and normally I've already sort of done that in the pressure cooker, so I usually just go ahead and use the pot. In this case today, I already had a sweet potato in my fridge cooked, so we're just going to use that one, so we'll use it fresh, but you don't have to use a pressure cooker, totally do it on the stove. So I'm just going to start this off on saute function. So we've got in the pan, I don't know if you can see, I'm going to move it a little closer here. Here we go. What we've got is, there's our on button, is some turkey. It's about a pound of turkey. Now you can use, if you want it to be a more hearty texture, then you just want to use 2 pounds of turkey instead of 1. My son prefers a soupier texture. He likes very brothy soup. So we're going to do 1 pound of turkey. We're going to put in a ton of kale. We're going to use some sweet potato. We're going to use some homemade chicken stock. And we're going to use some seasonings to go in there as well. But it's a pretty simple meal. It's very nourishing. I love this meal when I'm feeling maybe a little low energy, or if anyone's starting to feel like they're coming down with a little bit of a bug or something. And I just find it very comforting, and when you eat it, I actually feel like I'm actually being nourished as I intake it into my body. So that may sound a little odd, but that's how we feel about it, and that's why we eat it. And we probably make this a couple times a month. The beauty of this recipe, as with pretty much all the recipes that I will do for you on this channel, it's interchangeable. Like, you don't have to have the exact ingredients. They're kind of kitchen sink meals. So it's kind of taking what you've got on hand and making it work for you and your family if you're feeding a family. It's, you can use any kind of meat, ground meat in this. Frankly, it doesn't have to be ground meat. You can use chicken breast, or you can use beef stew meat if you want, particularly if you're doing it in the pressure cooker. But we like it with ground meat. We often do it with chicken or pork, are probably our 2 favorites, although ground beef does work really nicely in this recipe too. You can add any vegetable that you want. You can add beef broth or chicken broth or whatever vegetable stock if you've got it, and any really seasoning combination as well. Tonight's going to be sort of an Italian seasoning combo, but yeah, we'll just get going. So the turkey's just starting to heat up. I added just a tiny bit of avocado oil just to help it saute. So we're just going to saute this. Just going to check, make sure you can see it. Just going to bring it a little closer so we can see it a little bit better. There you go. So we're just going to brown this meat. Now, if I were making this just for my husband and I would put fresh onion and fresh garlic in it, but my son does not care for the texture of cooked onion and garlic. So we're going to use, because this is for the whole family, we're going to use onion powder and garlic powder in this recipe. But if you don't have texture sensitivities like we do in our house, then it is actually, I think, tastes better with chopped up onion and garlic. And what I would use is 1 to 2 cloves of garlic minced, and I would use I'd use 1 large onion because I like onion and I like the flavor that it gives. In this, it would make the broth really, really nice. So we're just gonna cook this up, get this going. Just take a few minutes there. So it'll only take about 5 minutes to brown this meat. So we'll just let that brown. Once the meat is just about brown, I'd go ahead and start adding the seasonings. I'm going to add just a tiny bit because I don't want to add more oil to it. Again, I'm not against oil. Oil's great, or fats are great if they're good fats. But just for flavor purposes, avocado oil doesn't really have, it's very neutral flavor. So I just add a tiny bit of chicken stock just to help finish cooking that meat so that it's brown. So this is almost completely browned. I'm going to go ahead and start adding the seasoning. So we use the pink Himalayan sea salt here at home. I'm going to use probably, I find that this isn't as salty. I think I've said that in other videos as regular table salt. So I'm going to use probably, it's about 2 teaspoons. I'd start with a teaspoon if I were you and add a little bit more as you go. Because we actually are going to put some Herbamare in here too, which is also a little salty. So you don't need as much salt. So I also use this Herbamare. Again, not sponsored. This is just what we use at home. It's a mix of herbs, organic herbs, and some vegetables and sea vegetables. Now, my understanding is the one thing in here that someone has asked me about is the celery. My understanding is it's actually dehydrated celery, not celery seed, which is okay. So if you're really concerned about it, I have not had a bad reaction to this. It's totally gluten, lactose, all of those things free. But if you're concerned about the celery flavor coming from celery seed, which is not AIP friendly in the initial phases, maybe just call the company. But I have not done that because I have not had haven't had any kind of reaction to it, which could just mean that I don't have an issue with celery seed, or it could mean that it's fine. But I'm under the impression that it's actually dehydrated celery, the actual vegetable in it. So there's that. So we're just going to add, a couple of shakes of that. It's pretty flavorful, and you can always add more later. Then I'm going to add, as we talked about, onion powder. At least 2 teaspoons for that. And as you guys are probably learning, I eyeball things a lot. Garlic powder, at least 1.5 teaspoons, maybe close to 2 teaspoons as well. And this is 1 pound of meat, so if you have more meat, you are going to want more of those seasonings for certain. I'm also going to add some parsley just because I have it and I thought it would be pretty. So we're going to add a chunk of that. That's probably at least 1 tablespoon or more. And we're going with kind of a more Italian flavor this evening. So I'm going to put some Italian seasoning, dried Italian seasoning in there too. And that's at least 1 tablespoon, maybe 1.5 tablespoons there. Oh, it smells like spaghetti sauce actually. It smells really good. Okay. That's great. Okay. Might even put some fresh basil in this. We'll see how it goes. So there's that. Next, I'm going to actually put in the sweet potato. Now, this sweet potato was I took a couple of big sweet potatoes at the beginning of So this sweet potato I prepped a few days ago. So what I did was I just take a couple of big sweet potatoes every week, and I either roast them or I pressure cook them so that they're mashed. So the last 4 days I've had more mashed, so I took a more traditional yam and then a white, I don't know what these are called, patata batas or something like that. Anyway, they're white sweet potatoes. Cooked them in the pressure cooker till they were super soft and like mashed potatoes. And then this was just what was left from my week, so I'm just going to add that in. Now, the reason I do mashed, if it's you and you guys do not have texture issues or flavor issues or anything like that at your house, I like it better if it's just cubed up sweet potato and cooked, and then you have like it'd be almost like a regular potato that you would dice into the soup, particularly if you use the white ones because they're not quite as sweet as the orange ones. But again, because my son is texture particular, I'll say he's texture particular. He doesn't actually love the cubed anything. He'll do it with potatoes and that's about it, but he doesn't like cubed carrots and things. He likes the flavor of it, but not the texture. So I just use the mashed because what will happen is it kind of dissolves, it flavors the broth beautifully, and we get those nutrients still in those carbs, which are important for growing bodies, in our bodies, and without kind of the issues around texture. So then that's great. So the meat is browned, the seasonings are in, the potatoes in. I'm going to add, I had this little bit of broth I was cooking with, I'm just going to add that. And I'm going to add, as you can see, I did an Instant Pot full of chicken broth earlier this week as well. And I'm gonna put that in here. Just gonna make sure it doesn't go too high up because we do need room for, that should be perfect. That's perfect, okay. Need room for the kale. So I'm actually gonna, at this point, I'm gonna pressure cook this for like 1 minute because it doesn't really need to be pressure cooked for any more than that. And actually, you know what? Actually, we'll just skip that whole step. We'll just we're gonna put in the kale and then we'll pressure cook it because it's gonna get hot either way, and that's really all that we need it to do at this point. So this was just a ton of kale I had left over in my fridge. I didn't want it to go bad. And instead of making kale chips or freezing it, I thought this would be a great way to use it up. And I think I've said in other videos, we just really like to try to get in as many vegetables as we can, particularly the deep green leafies are really just great for my body in particular, but for all of us. Kale is probably our go-to green. We like spinach as well, chard and all those, but kale and spinach seem to be the easiest ones to find in general. So all you're gonna do now is, and we'll taste it after, but all you're gonna do now is put your lid on. You're gonna set your steam button. You're gonna do a manual. You're gonna do a pressure cook. You're gonna cancel the saute, which is what it was on. You're gonna do a pressure cook, and I'm literally gonna pressure cook it for 2 minutes. You could do it for 1, frankly. So it'll take a few minutes obviously to get up to temp because that broth, that stock was cold. But it was on the saute function, so it won't take quite as long. So I'm gonna pop off. We'll come back when that's done. We'll have a look at it. We'll test our seasonings and we'll see if it's ready. Okay. Okay, we're back. It occurred to me that I didn't say how you finish it on the stovetop. So you basically would just cover it, bring it to a boil, and let it cook until the kale is done, which is just 2 or 3 minutes really once it starts boiling. If I'm being honest, I probably won't do this again in the pressure cooker. I'll probably do it on the stovetop because it actually doesn't take as long on the stovetop as it does in the pressure cooker if your liquid is cold. If your liquid is already warm, like you've maybe just made fresh stock and you're gonna do it right away, then it's super fast. But it takes quite a while to get up to pressure with the cold liquid in there. So that's it. So we've released the steam. We did a quick release, so as soon as the couple minutes was over, we did that. I'm just gonna open it up and have a look. That over there. So that's I don't know how well you can see that, but it's just the turkey. The sweet potatoes all sort of dissolve down in to just add flavor. You've got the kale that's cut up in there, hopefully in nice spoon-sized pieces. I did have a bunch of fresh basil in the fridge, so I'm just gonna add that in real quick. This is not a necessary step, but since I did Italian-based seasoning, I thought this might be nice, and we needed to use it up. So I'm just going to add this in there, and you don't have to re-cook it or anything like that. I'm going to hit the cancel button, and that'll just wilt down in, and it'll make it delicious. Just going to stir this so that usually you don't have any sticking issues with an Instant Pot with liquid like this in it. I'm just gonna go grab my testing spoon. Okay, and here's where we'll test it, and we'll make sure that the flavor is good, and if not, we can just add any last little bits of seasoning here. Mainly just checking the broth because the turkey's gonna soak up whatever flavor it is. It's good. I think it needs a little bit more garlic, actually. Just do a tiny bit more of that. And it does need more salt, but I'm going to actually use more Herbamare, which gives it a bit of the salt and a bit of the other flavor too. I'm going to mix that in. Just test it. Yep, that'll do it. Again, make it to whatever you and your family's liking is. Looks like my battery's dying here. And that's it. I'll be back in just a minute. I'll show you what it looks like in a bowl. And then that'll be dinner for tonight. Okay, you can see that. It's very green. It's a very green soup. It's quite delicious. You can serve it with, we often serve it with an AIP biscuit or bun, or the boys just with a gluten-free biscuit or bun, which I have a recipe for something like that coming in the next week or so. It might even be out before you see this video. Again, just a really yummy, nutritious meal. The changes I would make immediately are, I would actually do it on the stovetop. I think it's way easier and it's faster. I would also maybe do 2 pounds of meat for this size of a stew to make it more hearty, get a little bit more protein in there. Other than that, it's really delicious. Again, it's a kitchen sink sort of stew. Any meat, any seasonings, any vegetable. Just pick a sweet potato and or some other kind of AIP approved starch. E-vegetable, get your greens in there, whatever kind you like, whatever seasonings you like. You can get a little creative. Really, anything you've got on hand, that's the way to go. Thanks for joining us, and go ahead and like and subscribe if you like this. If you want more soup type meals or this type of folly type meals, I know it's the middle of the summer, you may not want those yet. But if you do, or if you liked this, then go ahead and hit that little thumbs up button and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.